Alrighty guys, welcome to the 7th episode of Torchlite. My name is Jacob Binder, and
I'm John Mitchell.
Alright, and so Mr. Mitchell, what do you teach at the school?
I teach the Advanced Placement U.S. History courses.
Okay, and this is kind of pertinent right now. So, what is your take on all of the student voice in politics ever since the March on Our Lives movement?
My take is that I'm impressed with the activism, and I'm going to watch closely because I'm curious to see if there's any actual policy changes that result from it.
Okay. So people like, gosh, I forgot his name off the top of my head. The kid who people were saying that, since his dad was in the FBI, he was like an actor in that shooting, or...
Isn't his name Hogg, or...?
Yeah, Hogg.
Okay.
I forgot his first name. How do you feel about adults specifically taking like real pot shots out, like on social media and stuff, like with other newscasters calling him just bad names over social media?
I feel unimpressed but not surprised.
Like how so?
I'm unimpressed because it's mean, and I'm not surprised because people are mean.
Like,
and trust me, it's a really common thing. It's a really common thing for the rebuttal to an argument to not be a rebuttal to an argument, but just an attack on the messenger.
yeah, just an ad hominem, just personal attack. And I mean, some people say that, Hogg doesn't get a free pass because he's said similar things about the organizations that are criticizing him. Other people say that he does get a free pass because, he is just a teenager.
Is that true? Has he deliberately gone after the character of individual human beings with whom he disagrees? Has he tried to undermine their standing in the debate? Or has he made arguments about policy that they disagree with?
I feel like that...
I don't know the answer to that question. It could be that what he's getting, he has given, but I have not seen the examples of him saying things about people, the type of stuff that people have said about him.
I've seen examples of him saying stuff about the National Rifle Association, but maybe not in specific people.
Okay, that's an institution.
Yeah.
It's a very different thing from an individual human being.
Yeah. And I do feel like some people use that as an excuse to, personally attack him and call him like an actor in that shooting. Just like,
yeah.
Me personally, I don't see the validity in that, and I think that was just kind of gross for people to say.
If you were making money off the clicks and faves and likes and shares, you might see the validity in it. If you were making money off of the, absurd conspiracy theories that are going to surround that activist or any activist, then, not saying you personally, but
oh, yeah.
a person of otherwise good character might suddenly think that it's okay to get to be part of that because there's people making money off of it.
So, me as a journalism student, do you think that maybe perhaps for other aspiring journalists or anyone who's an activist, they really need to be careful about stuff like that, like really favoring profit over hard facts and the truth in specific, like being a moral journalist? Or do you think that maybe that problem is kind of just a...
I prefer moral journalists to immoral ones. That's my take on that.
Yeah, I think I'd hope most people do. Just because it's easy, especially even if you are a moral journalist, it is easy for, to get facts wrong and to see stuff that's not there. And then some people take advantage of that and deliberately use that misinformation to say things that just aren't true.
Yes, you're right. There's people who do that, for sure.
Yeah, but I feel like, especially with March for Our Lives, some people, they look at it as something kind of, I guess, a byproduct of millennials, but that concept of, they're just millennials, they whine about everything and stuff, and I feel like some people believe that.
Well, the whole giving generations name thing, names a thing is, I think, at least questionable, but, you know, let's just say for the sake of this discussion that you can identify a generation and then give it a name, and then you know, assign attributes to it as if it were a subculture, right? Let's just say that you can do that, okay. Now, and let's say, I thought that if you were born in the 21st century or close to it, that you were too young to be a millennial, but let's just say that those people are millennials too, all right? I would be happy to open any US history book with anybody and start looking at the attributes of those older named generations. And I don't care how revered they are by the culture in general, they've all done really terrible things. We may not know too much about what the newest generation has done yet, but we know what the previous ones have done, and you know, there's plenty to be impressed with too. But the idea that as you go from the oldest generation to the newest one, that there's some declining slope of quality, that's ridiculous. You would have to have a profound and deliberate ignorance of American history to believe that to be true.
I would agree. And speaking of the marching for our lives.
Now, don't get me wrong, you could end up sucking just as much as the rest of them, but we don't know yet. But the idea that you're already just destined to be like a lower quality set of people than Gen Xers like me, or baby boomers like President Trump, or greatest generation people like, I guess, anybody who's 85 or older. The idea that, you know, in toto, that y'all are gonna contribute less good and more bad to the culture in the country, that's an absurd statement to be rejected out of hand.
Well, I mean, also you can't group an entire people born after like a time.
By the way, if saying nice things like this about teenagers make my class more popular, because I have a real problem with that.
I mean, maybe. I would hope so. I mean, just because, yeah, it's very, I mean, nowadays especially, it's very rare for people to, you know, say nice things about the young people, instead of just like kind of, the young people.
Not new, yeah, it's not new. That's another thing that any ordinary history book would reveal. Whatever y'all are doing and into is greeted by suspicion by, you know, the previous couple of generations. Not new.
I mean, it was the same thing, you know, back in the 70s and stuff like that. I mean, I'm pretty sure you have a much more detailed account of that. I mean, like being a history teacher and all. Just being able to see that, you know, there was a counterculture. I mean, whenever rock and roll was on the rise and stuff like that.
There is always a counterculture. There's always a dominant culture, and if there's any kind of organized effort to change it or resist it, then there is also a counterculture. It's funny, I was just talking to class today about how culture is the stuff that people make, people do, and people believe. Cognitive, normative, and behavioral culture. And whenever, like I said a second ago, whenever there's an attempt to change either the beliefs, the cognitive part, the behaviors, the normative or behavioral part, or bring acceptance of new physical objects into the culture, whenever there's an attempt to change those things, then what you have is a social movement, and if it's a deliberate attempt to like really kind of clash with the dominant culture, then it's a counterculture. Counter like contra, like against. If your mind immediately goes to like hippies and Woodstock and the Summer of Love when you hear the term counterculture, then your understanding of that term is too narrow. You know, and again, this is an example just from class today. The Supreme Court justice in the 50s and 60s, Earl Warren, you know, who presumably wore suit and tie to work and had a short haircut. He was governor of California and a Republican before he was the most liberal Supreme Court Chief Justice that we've ever had. He was counterculture in the sense that the dominant culture supported Jim Crow. The dominant culture supported legal lynching. The dominant culture supported bans on interracial marriage and birth control in about half the states of this country. I was born in 1969. About half the states in this country had bans on ordinary methods of birth control and interracial marriage until almost the time that I was born. So at least in big parts of the country, if not the country as a whole, that was the dominant culture. That those forms of discrimination and suppression of minority rights were okay. And you were counterculture if you were, you know, tuning out and dropping acid or whatever and going to Woodstock in '69, but you were also counterculture if you were part of some institution that had the strength to challenge the dominant culture and you used it. So there's always dominant culture and counterculture. I don't know if these teen activists you're talking about or not are dominant culture or counterculture. I don't know.
What causes that confusion?
In me, I'm not being smart enough, I guess. I don't know. I'm confused about a lot of things.
I mean, like, what makes
Just
you...
because I know some facts about American history doesn't mean I understand them all. I read the newspaper every day and I have a hard time understanding about 80% of what's in there. But I'm trying.
Well, yeah, but it is interesting. It's like, so, because I would see it as a counterculture.
See
Me
what?
personally, or like teen activists, you know, because they're fighting like...
Okay, we'll be specific. Okay, what is the specific change in belief patterns or behavior patterns that they are trying to create?
I would say that, I mean, in specific, Marching for Our Lives.
Okay, March for Our Lives
March for
has
Our
a pretty specific policy concern, which is changes in gun laws, right? Okay, well, what does, and I don't know the answer to this question, but what does the dominant culture say about guns? Does the dominant culture say that the gun laws ought to be what they are? Or does the dominant culture say that they ought to be changed and be somewhat more restrictive?
I mean, I'll be honest, I'm not sure either.
I'm not either, because one of the reasons I think there's an opportunity for those students is that, I don't know how to say this exactly, sometimes an institution can be very, very popular but still represent a subculture instead of the dominant culture. I think it's possible that the NRA represents a subculture, but it's a politically powerful subculture that has sort of cowed the silent majority that doesn't necessarily want to fight them because they got a lot of guns. But, and I don't mean fight them literally with guns, but
Of course.
it's a fact that the percentage of households which are gun-owning households is decreasing. Okay, if you randomly pick a household today, it is less likely to be a gun-owning household than it was 5 or 10 or 20 or 50 years ago. It's also true that but don't take my word for any of this. It's all very easy to look these things up. Okay.
Please Google it.
Or Bing. I hear Bing's really good.
Don't use Bing. Don't use Bing.
However, if you look only at those households which are gun-owning households, the average number of guns in each one of those is increasing. So the number of the per capita number of firearms in the United States is actually staying pretty stable. But what's happening is that guns are concentrating more and more in a smaller number of households. The point I'm trying to make is that the reason I'm not sure if the reason I'm not sure if the NRA represents the dominant culture or if the students in March for Our Lives represent the dominant culture is because I think we're maybe just kind of in a moment of flux there. I don't know. The last thing I'll say about that though is it is possible for a numerical minority to dominate, and all you got to do is think about South Africa, or the fact that there are slightly more women in the United States than there are men, but women do not dominate just look at any list of Fortune 500 CEOs, look at any list of President Trump's cabinet or photograph thereof, look at anything along those lines and you will see an overwhelming majority of men. So those are just a couple examples of cases in which the dominant culture may be a numerical minority, but they may for some reason still be like dominating the culture and preventing change in it.
I mean, yeah, it is, like you said, it is kind of confusing because you are right, like, it is, like, the NRA is a very politically powerful organization, and, whenever I talk to people about, stuff like gun control and stuff like that, I usually see kind of like a 50-50 thought process. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe. I mean, some people, I do see a lot of people agree, like, to raise the age. At least in the group of people I talk to, like to 21. But, I mean, seeing bans on certain firearms, some people will say, that's not really right. Other people will say, yeah, that is what we need. And I think one other misconception is that within the Marching for Our Lives movement, you have people all across the spectrum that are in this. Like, there are some people who don't want firearms in this country at all participating. There's others who, just want little changes, like raising the age. And
I don't doubt that there's diversity in that movement, but I would still expect it to be like diversity within the left. Nobody who self-identifies as conservative is part of that movement. There may be an outlier here or there, but I think there's going to be virtually zero who self-identify as conservative and yet warmly embrace the methods and goals of March for Our Lives. If you find one, let me know. But if I had to put money on anything, I would say that there ain't too many of them.
I would agree, just because I feel like it would go against a lot of popular conservative values and morals that are within that line of thinking.
You stated accurately, Jacob, that there are an awful lot of modest reforms in gun regulations that are popular when institutions poll on them. But there's a thing you have to consider when it comes to voter behavior. There's I think of it as width and depth, right? If you say something like, close the gun show loophole. There's some percentage of firearms that get sold at gun shows, and it might be easier to buy one there than it would be to buy one at a gun store if you had some kind of mark on your record that was supposed to prevent you from buying again. Things like that wouldn't radically change the number of firearms that are usable in the country, but for some segment of the population might make them harder to get. Those things always poll well, 70, 80, 90%. But there is, how do you feel about an issue? And there is, on the whole list of issues that you care about, is this one near the top or near the bottom? And that's the depth part, right? Because the issues that are near the top are the ones that you care about so much that you're definitely going to go and vote for or against someone based on their position on that issue. It's really is true, and liberals love to point this out, that a lot of even self-identified conservatives support some of the same gun restrictions that liberals support, okay? Zero of those Republicans are running to the polls, are making a point of voting, because that modest gun restriction is the thing that they care about. So does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you have to make a distinction between how popular something is and the effect of a set of opinions on that issue as it relates to voting patterns.
Because I'm kind of just going to use like an anecdotal kind of thing. Because with me, one big problem that I definitely will look at whenever I'm trying to vote for somebody is how do they feel about net neutrality. That may not be like the biggest issue in the world, but it's a big issue to me. And that's something that I do pay attention to a lot.
Good.
And
we need more people to pay attention to that. We need more people to decide if they want their ISPs to determine which websites they can get to quickly and which ones they will get to slowly.
that's a whole other can of
I
worms.
don't want the internet to be packaged for me the way that my cable TV is. So I'm glad to hear that there's at least one of y'all slack-jawed, ignorant video game playing millennials that has found time in his Tide Pod eating schedule to pay attention to the net neutrality issue.
I feel a little attacked here. I think you.
Well, it's not so much you as the social category that you're part of, and I just made you an exception, so you should feel not flattered.
Okay, now I'm just confused.
Yeah.
Kind of like a lot of people in
That's
class.
my special skill as a teacher. That's my special gift. My
Maybe
other
that's
one
why
is
your
making
classes are
students
popular.
forget the question they were gonna ask.
I
Did I
mean,
make you forget the question you were gonna ask?
no.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm so far. I'm just really enjoying this, just because
That's good.
it's been very educational.
The feeling's mutual as far as you know.
As far as I know, yeah, everyone loves being on my show. All like 6 other people. I love it.
Well, this will probably drive it way up to maybe low double figures.
Yeah, possibly. We'll get to 9 eventually. Anyway, I mean, I really do appreciate your point of view. And I really do appreciate.
You're the one.
Hmm?
It's a little joke. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get it. But man, we might have to cut this out. Nah, we're gonna leave it in. We're gonna leave it in bloopers. But I mean, yeah, like I really do feel, me personally, I really do feel like ever since the Marching for Our Lives movement, student activism really has been at a peak. Maybe not at a peak, but it's definitely been on the rise. And
Gosh, I hope this isn't the peak.
yeah, me neither. But I mean,
We're still
People-
in the foothills, I hope.
actually, yeah, that's a better way to put it.
Looking way up at the summit.
I mean, yeah, because
We're not even to base camp yet.
we're not. What is this, Everest?
Ain't you never climbed a mountain?
I can't say that I have. I'm sorry.
Just intellectually,
Oh, okay. Intellectually, maybe, but not physically.
of course.
I'd probably die.
What was your question?
My question, or my statement, really was, I really am happy to see that people like, because I interviewed him before, Chris Pino, the organizer for the Marching for Our Lives Town Hall, which, from my understanding, you were an attendee.
I was an attendee, not much more than attendee because Chris Pino did it. I am the sponsor of the club that did it, but the human being who did it was Chris. And really, he did. Go ahead and finish your question. I want to say some nice things about Chris.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, look, this is a great school, okay? It's a rich school, so it's a great school. And you have here students in huge numbers who will jump through the hoops that teachers put in front of them in a way that most students at most schools won't. And they're going to have fantastic lives because they're so hardworking and such great members, and in some cases leaders of teams, right? But even from within that cohort, that great set of amazing students that we have here, you can take a lot of them and put them in a situation where, you know, they're no longer going through the campaign of school, right? It's like taking somebody out of a campaign video game, the kind that I like, because I don't have to think too much and I'm just being led through a story,
Oh, yeah.
and dropping them in a sandbox, which is what the more real world is more like, right? And a lot of those kids who, you know, have never seen anything lower than an A on their report cards, and they'll do everything any teacher ever tells them, but the teacher has to tell them what to do. No matter how hard it is, they'll do it, but the teacher's got to tell them what it is, right? And then you take them out of that structure and, like, put them in a situation where the instructions are real broad and open-ended, and the student has to make a lot of decisions about what they're going to create. I'm sure that actually this room probably draws a lot of the kind of students who can handle that open-ended kind of creative challenge, but you know, how many students would never come within a mile of this place for that reason, right? Well, again, I'm rambling, but Chris, by putting on the event that he put on Saturday, the Town Hall for Our Lives event, where there were, I don't know, neighborhood of 100 people in attendance, many just from the community who heard about it and decided to come. There were elected officials from both political parties representing local, state, and national offices. You know, it was an example of somebody creating something new in the world that didn't previously exist. And, you know, that's a new level of sort of like sophisticated adult achievement that goes beyond even being the best straight A student who turns in all of his work, you know. So super impressed with Chris Pino and grateful to the people who came to that event. I've been here 11 years out of the 13 that this campus has been open, and if such an event has happened in the past, I sure don't remember seeing it. So I think Chris has done something new and special and so far unique to our campus. And I don't know who's going to see this, but he's a senior, and it would sure be great if someone with, you know, similar leadership abilities can carry the torch after Chris is done, because I've seen great clubs go out of existence the next year when they lost their leadership, and I hope that doesn't happen with ours.
Well, first of all, I think that's the worst pun we've had on this show. And secondly,
Mission accomplished.
good job, Chris Pino. I myself, I'm really proud of you. As soon as I heard about it, and as soon as I heard that you were organizing it, because I've had him ever since freshman year in my German class, and you know, you've always been that person that where I would believe that you would definitely do something like this. So I'm super proud of you. Awesome job. I really wish I could have gone. And yeah, you're just a really great guy. But
I know Chris has gotten good grades, and when I first met him, I thought that was maybe because his name sounds like a kind of wine, and teachers really dig that, but watching him in action has proved that it is in fact his competence as a student and as a leader that has gotten him those high marks.
yeah. And I think that people like Chris Pino and, you know, people that are in clubs that are organizing things like the town or the town hall really exemplify just how, because I was thinking about this as soon as you were saying this. I was thinking about something that Mr. Morris said about how our class, the senior class, could be the strongest class that's ever gone through Seven Lakes.
Like he doesn't say that to every senior class.
Well, I'd like to believe we're special. I'd like to believe.
Yeah.
I mean, no, not dissing Mr. Morris. That really touched my heart. And we are going to do an interview with him near the end, like nearer to the end of the year. But I feel like that would be one of our traits, is being leaders in our community and really going out of our way to not just be on a narrow, direct path, like you said, like comparing it to like a campaign video game. You know, because life is, like you said, like a sandbox. And
Yeah.
you really need to learn how to...
It took me way too long to figure that out. I mean, I thought until I was deep into college that life is this thing where you go to school, you get diploma, then degree, and then there's just some job you're just slotted into that corresponds with that degree. And I didn't get it at all. I mean, a big part of it was just because of the town and circumstances I grew up in. I never knew any college-educated professionals other than my teachers until I was, you know, into my 20s. But man, that's the thing I really keep telling my daughters is it's like, yeah, school's important, and you know, you better do well, and it's going to be very, very competitive in the job market that you're in. But also just, you know, having a picture in your head of what you might like to do for a living. You know, what you could see yourself not hating, and you know, making the amount of money you want to make and get some fulfillment out of, and then like you need to find ways to do something like that while you're young. And I didn't get that at all, you know.
Yeah.
I ended up doing the job that I wanted to do. I started telling people when I was a teenager that I would either teach school or go to law school, because like I said, I didn't know many college-educated professionals other than teachers, and there was one particular one who was a big influence on me. So I looked at his life and thought, that seems like a pretty good life. I'm gonna imitate or emulate that, whatever the right word is. So, you know, it more or less turned out okay for me. But looking at the careers of other people who I've known, I didn't appreciate until I was older how much they ended up in that career because it was part of their vision for their own future. And school was a part of that, but it wasn't just the schooling that prepared them for that job. You know, it was the internships that they participated in, and the research that they did on their own to find out what that job was all about. And I guess there's more of a creativity involved in tracking yourself toward the right career, and it has there's a lot more to it than just what the classes you take and whatever you major in school.
I mean, yeah, I mean, just because, you know, I've always been kind of under the impression that some students at this school, you know, they're very focused on grades, and they...
Oh, really?
I mean...
I hadn't
okay.
noticed.
Okay. All right. Okay. I was about to say, some people forget that there's a point to all of this other than just getting a grade.